Hello.
Oh, hey Ty, I have a question. Can I
Yeah,
work
what's up?
remotely for a month from Costa Rica?
Oh, wow. Uh, we should probably talk about that. Can you meet me at the gate?
I'm Rich Levine, and this is Meet Me at the Gate, where we're not just talking theory, we're tackling real world problems head on, driving solutions that supercharge productivity and team dynamics. Every episode is a journey towards improvement, empowering you, the manager, to lead with innovation and confidence. Join us to transform everyday roadblocks into highways for success. So, we go to these conferences in AAA, CAR. There's been a couple others. I can't think of them. They have these panels and they put people up front. And one of them that's been intriguing the crap out of me, just been bugging me, multi-generational leadership or working with multi-generational groups, which is fascinating because right now in the United States, I believe there's 5, possibly 6 active generations at work. I think it's 5 right now. 4 at the least, but there's a lot. So there's a lot of things going on. But I'm fascinated because they put all these people up front and they have multiple generations and they're talking and they're entertaining. Ty, you've seen them, right?
I haven't seen this one, though. I
You
know what you're
haven't?
talking about, but I haven't seen this multi-generational one.
See, have you seen any of them, Kelly?
No, nope.
So they put people up front, experts, whatever, auto remarketing experts, and they're up front. So I'm talking all just in the automotive ecosystem. I'm talking about going outside other conferences. And they have them up. So they put, a boomer, a Gen Xer, a Gen Z, a millennial, and maybe a couple others sprinkled in there. And they start asking questions. Well, how do you communicate? Well, how do you do this? How do you do that? And it's pretty interesting because it's entertaining.
Mhm.
They're like, will I text? Will I email? Will I call? Will I go face to face? But there's so much more to unpack than just, hey, I'm one person, I'm on the stage. Here's what we do. So what I want to chat about is the macro level. Let's back all the way out and find out what's really going on from a macro level that influences us at these auctions or dealerships or truck hauling or whatever it is on the micro level. So you in? You game?
I'm down. Count me in.
So
Yeah.
I think I've read 4 books recently. I'm a nerd. I read books. I gave up TV for books. So I've been writing down a ton of notes.
Okay.
And I actually jotted down 8 pages of notes. We're not going to get through all of them. But I thought, how the hell do we break this down? So first of all, let's talk about the generations, right? Then we'll talk about breaking them down. So what we've got, the silent generation, or some people call them the traditional generation. And they were the ones born roughly, these are rough, we can't categorize them, but roughly 1928 to 1945. That's the era after World War I and through World War II. And then after that, we have the boomers. So roughly 1946 to 1964. And what happened during the boomers age? Civil rights movement, Vietnam War, women's liberation. Those were things that influenced the behaviors of these generations. And then we get to us Gen Xers. And of course, we're the strongest generation. No one's going to say that, but I'll say that. So 1965 to 1980 is roughly the age frame for a Gen X. And what did we grow up in? Rapid technology growth, a lot of economic uncertainty. Look what happens since we've been born in our life. And then a lot of societal changes. I mean, you can pick one. You want to talk about LGBTQ community. You want to talk about biracial marriages. You want to talk about same-sex marriages. You name it. A lot of that stuff happened while we're living. Then we get to the millennials, 1981 to 1996. Again,
Awesome
it's
group.
a rough. What's that?
It's an awesome group.
So Kelly's a millennial.
Yeah.
So Kelly, closer to 81 or 96? Don't answer. I can't ask. I cannot
We're not in
ask.
an interview. It's acceptable. It's okay.
Oh, we're not in there. So if I were to throw a dart at the dartboard and the target is 1981 and the outer ring is 1996, where on the dartboard would that dart land?
Closer to your generation. Yeah.
I like it. It's closer to the middle. What does it say? Close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, and then other
heard
things.
that.
But we're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the Gen Zers, which are just now starting to come in the workforce. Roughly 1997 to 2012 is when these were born, and they're the first group that is really, truly digital natives. Technology has been around for their entire group. So that's a lot of groups. You know, I love to talk about DISC, right? So if we were to categorize generations according to the DISC, what would that look like? So I did a little homework, started writing down some differentiators on what are some words that describe D, I, S, and C, and what are some words that describe these different generations. All right, first question. We'll do quiz time. Like, which generation do you want to start with?
Let's go.
Silent.
I would say go in order. Yeah.
Oh, you want to go in order? Oh, okay. And you would be a C for compliant, which means we'd have to start with the early ones and work our way all the way through. Ty just jumps in because he's got a little bit of red and he wants to dominate. All right. We're going to have some fun. We're going to test. We're going to learn DISC as we go through this. So some characteristics of the silence. So they were shaped by the Great Depression, World War II, and the post-war economic prosperity. Okay. I'm going to tell you their tendencies. You tell me which one you think they are. They're characterized typically by being decisive, direct, and results-oriented. Typically assertive, take charge, and prefer clear directions and tangible outcomes.
Is that a red?
That is a red. Bing, 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 bing.
Ooh, 1 point.
And the first $100 prize goes to Kelly Kimball. Yeah, there's probably not a lot of traditionalists around, but let's go back through work history and look at, what's come down through. What does that fit? They like hierarchical organizations. They want to know who the boss is, who's the manager, who are the subordinates, and they want that rank and file.
Yeah. I was just going to say longer tenured as well, staying at one company for a long period of time, potentially.
Very loyal. Yeah, definitely.
Now we're doing this, we're tying in the DISC, the red, to a generation. Is that what we're working on here?
So we're just saying, roughly speaking, if we're going to try to categorize and say, okay, you see a traditionalist and why do the traditionalists behave the way they do? Why are they the way they are in the workforce? Well, their environment influenced them. That environment was the Great Depression, World War II, post-war economic prosperity. So they went through a lot of things.
Right.
Military was not volunteer. You were drafted. You got drafted. You went to the military. No questions asked.
Yep. Follow the rules. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I would think if you somehow made it through a Great Depression, you'd probably be result-oriented. Discipline. We have to save. We have to work hard. We have to get results if we're going to eat today. Is that fair?
Very fair.
Yeah.
So I could see how the silent, the silent group would definitely fall into the red category.
Bingo. All right. So let's go on. We'll cover them all. We'll come back. We'll fill in the gaps. All right. So going in order, according to our preferred method.
Thank you very much.
We got the baby boomers. So the behavioral tendencies of boomers that I jotted down are typically characterized by sociability, outgoing, persuasiveness. They're great communicators who excel at building strong relationships. They're great networkers, and they love to influence others.
Yellow.
Bingo. They're yellow.
2 points.
They're
for
definitely
me.
yellow. What's that? So you get double down. You get double points for that because you got 2 in a row.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Ty, are you okay? We're getting you uncomfortable here.
Over here. Yeah.
Well, I think there needs to be like a button so we can hit the button. Who can hit the button first? I think Kelly doesn't have a button, so she just jumps right in.
Yeah.
So
we talk about the rules in the beginning, I guess.
Yeah. So yeah. I should have done rules. That doesn't fit. Let's see. Okay.
Kelly likes rules.
Fit the rules.
The boomers they're not into rules.
But she's a Gen Xer. So let's jump down to Gen X's and see how much the Gen X has been influenced by rules. You'll be ready for this. It'll be good. All right.
They don't like rules.
So Gen X, I'm not going to tell you what type, but they're characterized by being supportive, systematic, and stable. They're methodical in their approach to work, and they prefer structured processes and clear expectations. Now, it's a touch ambiguous, but it definitely falls more into one category than the other.
Do you want to go first, Ty? Do you want me to raise my hand?
Here, I'll give you a couple more clues. Hang on. They also like to solve problems systematically, and they also like to contribute to long-term organizational goals. That's your clue. Long-term goals.
That's the millennial.
No, we're still talking about Gen X.
I was going to say blue. Green?
Oh,
No.
yeah.
Green.
There's my
First one.
buzzer. They're
Wow.
more along the greens because the long term is that steady. They just want to continue to work. The structure was a little bit of the blue. Greens, remember their motto is "Show me you care."
Well, I was going to say that's why I was waiting for the show me you care. I was going to guess that the next group was going to be the show me you care, but
Well, interesting. So as long as we're talking about it, let's go to the millennials.
yeah. Oh
All
no,
right.
that's what we were on, right? Or no?
Wait a minute. Did we
No,
fit?
we were
figure
on
out?
millennials. My bad. We were on millennials.
I was like, what? My answers are going to change.
Okay.
No, we were talking Gen
Time out.
X. That was Gen X. I just gave you Gen X. We're on to millennials because he entered millennials.
Gen X is green. Is Gen
Yeah.
X green?
Gen X is
Okay.
green. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
okay.
now we're on to millennials. So now I'm going to give you a different one. So millennials like to analyze information, solve complex problems, and make data-driven decisions.
That's the
I
blue.
don't need to give you any more on that.
No, that's the blue. That's me.
Absolutely.
Right.
They're as blue can be.
Then that makes sense. So then the younger generation is going to be the show me you care one. So I was right. I should have like 4-0.
Well, let's talk about this now. So Gen Z, 1997 to 2012. Do we have any Gen Zers? Ty, are you a Gen Z? Okay, I was just making sure. I was just double checking. All right. Their values are diversity, inclusion, and they like opportunities for growth, innovation, and meaningful contributions. That's kind of what that's their work expectation. They're goal-oriented, results-driven, and they have a strong desire to make an impact and leave their mark on the world. They like to innovate and drive change. So this is the first one that actually blends into two pretty clearly.
Is it a green yellow?
You got one right.
Oh,
This is weird, and we're gonna tie this all the way back.
perfect. Ty, what's your guess?
Ty, what's your guess? Come on, Ty. Where's the Jeopardy
I'm trying
song?
to figure out. Am I guessing the disc profile or am I guessing the generation?
No, we're
That's
talking
where
the
I'm-
generation's Gen Z. So if we're going to align them, if you could possibly align them with a behavioral type, which type would it be? And this one is a combination.
How about yellow blue?
You got one right. So you and Kelly.
Kelly
both
got one right.
That's-
So Kelly,
Yellow.
Kelly got-
yellow, I think is
Yellow.
definitely part of it.
Yep. Yellow's definitely
Yellow,
part. Now
red.
Yeah, bingo. So here's what's interesting, and I've got this theory, and I've read a lot of books. Doesn't mean I'm right, but I've started putting this together the way I look at it. So let's take the clock. Midnight is going to be our traditionalists or the silence. Okay. So then we got 5 of them. So we're going to go to every 10 minutes or every 2 hours. So now 2 o'clock, that's going to be your boomers. 4 o'clock, that's going to be your Gen Xers. 6 o'clock, that's going to be your millennials. 8 o'clock, we're now getting down to our Gen Zs. Did I get them all right? So as we're going around the clock, we're going. And what I've noticed in behavioral patterns with these generations is they always look back one generation back. So let's take the traditionalists. What they do, they went off the war. They got back before World War II, and they had babies to go fight World War II. When the World War II guys came home, they started the baby boomers. And what'd they do? They started protecting them. Oh, don't go to war. You know, we don't want you to have to do that. And they started coddling them a little bit. Okay. And then the boomers started using their eye colors, their influence. They like to go out and they like to party. They did Woodstock. They did some other fun things, right? And they started challenging things, started challenging assumptions. Which was the first generation to boycott a war? What was the first generation when the laws were passed that they took the army from being involuntary to being voluntary? The boomers. So now the boomers are weakening the system a little bit, right? They'll never say it. They'll say, I'm a boomer. Yeah, I didn't ever do that. Well, yeah, you did. Sorry, but that's just the way it is. And then we go to the Xers, and then the Xers, what are we doing? We had these boomers, and they were like, oh, Gen X. Oh, here's a trophy for you, Gen Xer. You went and played soccer, little Johnny. Here's an X. So what happened? We all started being coddled a little more. Then we go all the way through, and this continues. Okay. And everybody keeps looking backwards. And now we're all the way up to the Gen Z, and they're now in the workforce. And everybody wants to look backwards and say, oh, you guys are so soft because it's just getting softer and softer and softer. But ironically, they're getting closer to midnight where we start the traditionalists, which is where that D comes in. And this is the first time when you look at a group of people, you can't look backwards. You got to look forwards. These guys are, with their patterns or social behaviors, are more like the traditionalists than any other generation. We're actually coming full circle. Problem is nobody wants to step back and look at it, and they want to blame somebody else. Oh, that's just the way, Gen Zs are. They're lazy. They're not going to work. No, they want the same traditional values we had. When you came home from work in the 1920s, 30s, if you even could find a job, right? Because we went through the Depression. Did anybody work past 5? No, you worked 8 hours.
True.
You went home. You had family time. You had a meal with your family. You sat and did family activities. What did Gen Z want right now?
Yep.
Family time.
Balance. Yeah.
Exactly. Here we are, work-life balance. It's come full circle. But yet we look at the lens that we're looking through this is just, sometimes it's archaic, and we've actually got to kind of relay everything out and say, wait a second, is this really as bad as we think it is?
Interesting. Huh. Ty and I were just talking about that. How do we work remote? How do we work remote for a certain period of time to have more work-life balance, right? Like remote in a different country. I mean, I work remote anyway, but remote somewhere else.
And some of the technology that we have are bringing it on. So here's another example I'm going to throw at you that I put this together in my head as I was reading all these different books. Which generation invented the internet?
Boomer. No, I'm sorry.
It was the boomers. It was the boomers. Boomers boomer generation invented it. Okay. The boomers were the ones working out, creating that stuff. Steve Jobs, Bill Gates. They were boomers. Okay. Those guys were the ones that started creating all this software and all these home computer things. Which generation was the first generation to start using a lot of that stuff? Yeah.
Gen Z.
Gen X. The next
Gen X. Yeah.
Gen X was. Gen Z is the one that's fully adopted all the way through. But now what's happened? So we go to the workplace, right? And today, people are on the internet browsing. Like when basketball season comes around, everybody's looking at the NCAA brackets, right? Super Bowl. Everybody's wanting to watch the Super Bowl. Instagram, Facebook, all this stuff. What are we using? We're using the internet. Who invented it? The boomers. Who gets pissed off at work if somebody's on the internet, not using it the way they intended to?
Yeah.
Hey, boomer.
The boomer.
Exactly.
The boomer and the Gen X. Gen X gets a little hot too about it, I think.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, it depends on where you fell in the Gen X. I'm early Gen X, so I have tendencies to be a little more boomer. But we always want to blame. There's a lot of blame going on in generations. We say, oh, that generation, they're never going to be as good as me. Oh, they don't know how good we've got it, whatever. So let's go all the way back, and I'm going to go to prehistoric. I'm going to use prehistoric terms. Caveman. The first caveman events fire. Okay. They're all sitting, they got fire. They're cool. We got a fire. So now we got your family, and there's probably a little tribe, and they're like, oh, this is great. We don't have to eat raw food anymore, and we got heat to sleep by at night. This is cool. So let's say that goes by for one generation, maybe 2 generations. Back in the caveman time, technology is what divides these generational gaps. Technology didn't really get any farther. They still had fire. They may have had some sticks and stone weapons. So now think 2 generations after campfire is invented. Hey, son. Hey, daughter. You don't know how good you got it. When I was growing up, we had to eat raw food and had no heat. It's the same thing that goes on now. This can just gets kicked down forever. But we take these tendencies to work with us.
True.
And then we show up at an auction. In the automotive industry is very, very traditional, very hierarchical, and they fit that traditionalist stereotype. Mm-hmm. And those things are hard to break. So we're working in this workforce where we've got all these goofy tendencies going on where don't use the internet unless it's for work. Put your phone away.
Right. How do we break it?
I'm not paying you to stand around and look at your phone.
Well, yeah, you are, because I already got it done because I'm a millennial or I'm a Gen Z, and I figured out how to use my phone to do your process 10 times faster than you. And you haven't given me any more work to do. So what do you want me to do? I'm checking on grandma, I'm checking on grandpa. I'm checking on the daycare person, make sure my kids are okay. If they have kids and if they got married, because a lot of the Gen Zs aren't.
Yep.
Gen Zs aren't getting married or having kids?
No, they're putting it off.
Yeah, I agree.
Because they can't afford it. Affordability.
So let's figure out, if you're looking at this and you're going to move your clock example. Yep. So I believe history repeats itself. There's an interesting element here. You made a comment about, go super macro. Well, depends on which crowd you roll in, but some people talk about 5G warfare. Have you heard of this?
No. I'm living
not
under a
5G.
rock.
I'm sorry, it's not. I might have messed the name up. Okay, so it's definitely warfare. It's definitely technology, and the thought process behind this is In today's world, we don't need to go take our guns and just blow people up. We just take technology, we hack the system, we shut the system down. We can shut down an entire plane in the middle of the air with hackers, whatever those guys are. Have you heard any of this?
No.
I'm gonna really figure it out. But the point is that if you really look at where we are today in the world, I'm sure I can come up with at least 2 wars happening right now. I think, okay, we're kind of saying history doesn't repeat itself, but at the same time, I think it does, because I think, according to your clock analogy, the next hand is going to be midnight, 12.
Yep.
So, and that at that point, that's where we start looking forward. If I'm hearing you right. So, I've always been taught that history does repeat itself. We keep making the same mistakes, and that at this point, if we're going to have a World War III, whatever that looks like, it kind of lines up with what you're talking about. Because war typically is just, in my opinion, again, I could be completely wrong, but it seems like it's another fresh start. So what happened when they came back from, what'd you say, Vietnam? That was the silent group?
No, the silent group came back from World War I.
World War I, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. And, who likes war anyway?
Nobody likes war, but we talk about it. So let's put this in context of work. It was the boomers. The boomers were the ones out saying, hey, I'm not going to go to war. Muhammad Ali, remember, Muhammad Ali is a boomer. He said, I'm not going to war. Because it's the first time, so if you look at it from the personality traits, it's that I, that's an influencer. They're trying to make change. They're trying to influence people, persuade things. They want things to be different. The boomers didn't ever want to go back to war. They all wanted peace. I mean, here's some other social phenomenon that happened in when boomers were big. Drugs became a big part. Like, we're Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. I mean, what the heck? I mean, that stuff just isn't accidental. Somebody's going to be on and say, no, I've looked it up. The Beatles didn't write that song about that. But then what happened at Woodstock? Don't tell me that everybody there was just drinking water and everybody was just smoking tobacco.
Well, this ties in with the birth rate. So in today's atmosphere, the birth rate's like dropping dramatically. I think it was you had mentioned when they came back from World War I, they had a lot of babies.
They came back from World War II. So you come back from World War II in 1944, 1945. So that's when everybody starts getting pregnant, because that's when the boomers started. So the boomers start in 1946, right after it's over. They're like, hey, well, let's go. It was welcome home from the war. And they got in bed and did the horizontal limbo, naked twister, human pretzels, whatever you want to call it. And then all of a sudden, all these babies started coming out. And that's where the baby boomers comes from.
Was there a shortage of kids by chance? What was the reason for let's have a lot of babies?
From what I understand, I don't have proof of this. What I understand, it's to replenish what was blasted from the war, replace all the deaths, because you just had 2 wars back to back, World War I, World War II. You also had a influenza pandemic that happened in 1918. World War I ends in 1917, I believe, and then you had the influenza pandemic of 1918 or 1919. And then a few years later, after the Depression, we go off to World War II. That was a pretty rough time to be alive.
Yeah.
Right. So what have we gone through the last 4 years? We went through a pandemic. We lost a lot of people. And you can even look at it now. I know nobody wants to talk about it, but there are still people dying from that, and not because of COVID itself. So you got a lot of people dying. Back to 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock is coming up.
Yeah. Well,
we have a shortage of people.
Here's the other thing, too. So let's go back to the late 19th century, late 1800s, and let's go over to Central Europe. During that time in Central Europe, there were a lot of unrest, a lot of revolutionary wars. But there were a lot of these little revolutions over in Central Europe. And then what happens after that? That's the 1890s. They keep going. 15 years later, outbreak of World War I. What's going on right now in the world? It's not the same region, but it's Eastern Europe and the Middle East. We got a lot of civil unrest. We got a lot of people doing the same thing. We are repeating patterns right now, and it's scary. But now we've really got everybody depressed. So let's tie this back to work. What does multi-generational workforce have?
Are we depressed, or are we thinking about how we're going to make kids?
I'm thinking about how we're going to make kids, but I'm too old, so that ain't going to happen, Tom.
Same problem here.
Edit.
Wow.
Edit, cut.
Yeah.
You got to leave that in there. Come on, man.
Come on.
It's great.
Come on, man.
Come on, man. Okay, yeah, let's go back to make it fun. What are we having fun with?
So multi-generational workforce, right? So you have all these different people working in there. Why are we having problems with people getting along at work? Probably because there's 3 at a minimum, 4 generations working right now. Gen Z, the millennials, Gen X, and boomers. Because for the most part, the silents of all retired. Now, there are a couple of silents still working. I believe I've got one working for me. Okay. So there could be 5. But there's a lot of different, there's a lot of different behaviors that go on there because they were all influenced by different cultural events. They were influenced by technology. We talked about Gen Z. They're the first ones to grow up with digital technology in their hands at birth. When I was alive, so I was born, and we'll just hit it. We're just going to rattle it off. 1971, right? Smack dab in the middle of Gen X. Actually, earlier part of Gen X. In my lifetime, what did I see invented? The remote control. I used to be the remote control. Hey, Rich, go change the channel. We used to get 3 channels. We used to turn the antennas. We could get 2 of the 3 channels. I was the remote control. That was invented. VCR was invented. The personal computer was invented. I remember when typewriters went out and word processors were out. So we had all this technology. Hell, I even talked, if I wanted to find a date and line a date up for Friday or Saturday night, I had to sneak off, grab a phone, hope the cord was long enough that I could hide behind the couch or behind in some other closet so I could go talk and call a girl and hope to God I wasn't going to get shot down because we didn't have caller ID either. So the girl was going to answer, and then you're like, you catch her off guard. Now you're like, you talk about the things we hit. So those are all things that influence our behaviors.
At the same
What's
time.
that?
Or hope that someone else didn't pick up the other line in the house.
Oh yeah, and hearing your conversations. Yeah. So these are actually phenomenons that influence our work and the way we show up at work. But yet, I don't want to trivialize it, but it's not, I prefer text, or I prefer a phone call, or I prefer face to face. It's deeper than that. It's bigger than that. That's why I said macro. We got to back up and look at the whole thing and what's influencing these people at work.
So you're looking at this from the standpoint, okay, it finally all came together for me. I'm a little slow. Sweet. You're looking at this from the standpoint of, if you're going to go in and help somebody, a company that has these multi-generationals that are having internal conflict because they don't like each other for whatever reason, this may be one part of the reason that there's problems. And so as a leader, knowing what we're dealing with, we might have a better shot at keeping everybody on payroll and showing up to work, maybe.
So let's tie this to value-based leadership. And I say it all the time. I've got the 4. I wrote about it in my book. If you want to buy a copy, it's called You're Doing It Wrong. Stop Managing and Start Leading. There's my shameless book plug. We talk about the values in my book: trust, hope, humility, and empathy. Those 4 values put together build what I call dignity. Dignity, translated, is really respect. Regardless of who you are, what generation you are in the workforce. If you build trust, if you give hope, if you're humble or showing humility, and you're empathetic, you're creating respect. That's all people want. So now just reverse engineer it. Okay, what is it, Ty? What do you want? I need to show you respect. I start showing you respect. Are you really going to care what generation we're from? Are you going to care what war you fought in? Are you going to care what religion you are? Hell no.
It made me think about respect for what you've been through, right? I mean, you talked about the story of, you just said it right now, like you were the remote control. I mean, you heard the stories before of like, oh, I had to walk to school in the snow, down a hill or up a hill and all that stuff. It's respect for what you've been through. Different generations have been through different things, and respecting kind of their hard times, because each generation thinks the next one has it a little bit easier because of them. Whether that's true or not, we all have hard things that go on in the generations, but I think it ties into your respecting what people have been through. And that's more than generational, but maybe that would help as well.
And I think we go back to the technology thing, like you just said. What is technology designed to do? It's help to make things easier. So as we continue to invent new technology and move down the road, everything is going to get easier. No campfire to campfire got easier. You could now cook food, right? Yep. All the way up to where we're at now, and look at all the tools that we have. And people are AI. I mean, artificial intelligence wasn't even around.
No, I'm following along. We're getting good. We're about ready to solve the problem.
I think I just gave the solution, but let's hear it in your guys' words. How do we solve multi-generational conflict?
Well, I think again, I could be completely wrong, but for some reason it feels like there's definitely an element of time involved. It requires time to listen, time to speak, engage. What's your problem? Education for sure. So as a leader, how do you know these things? Where do you get this understanding? Is that fair?
Yeah.
I mean, you can read Rich's book, you can call Rich or Ty or Kelly, but then at the same time, it always comes back to, are you kidding me? People don't know this?
Well, so and I've talked about this before in other podcasts. It's front stage, backstage. You show up at work, and that's the front stage. So you start putting on the scene what you think people want, and people start thinking, "Oh, they want production, they want profits, they want their plans heard, and they want to improve their processes." Yeah, that's what we want as a business thing, but that's not what we want as an individual, as a human being, as a person. That's where things get screwed up in my book.
Well, I think we've had this talk. It's finding that balance. I mean, unfortunately, the company that you work for is number one goal is to make money so that you can have a job. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's stated fairly. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We're here
So then, if you go to the most recent generation who says, "I need work-life balance. I really don't care about your profits right now." Kelly, what do you do?
Well, I think there's a culture. I mean, I think at the end of the day, right, they have to make money, but I'm not sure I would say that that's necessarily, well, it's not the number one driving factor for a lot of, or some individuals, maybe some generations, right? Making money isn't their motivator.
Right. Well, see, to me, there's again another fine line is I said it. I think I said it. I said company needs to make money so that you can have a job. At the same time, I think we can all pick a company that we've worked for, that we've watched, that took that idea of making money and turned it into a ridiculous environment that nobody cares about anything anymore except making money. So at some point, is it okay to call them out and say, "Hey, I think you're missing the target here"? Or do you just get fired?
Just get fired. So here's something that was just going through my head. Okay, so let's go back to the traditionalists. What did they want? They wanted hierarchical structure. They were motivated by being told what to do and completing a task. Boiled down very simply, that was their motivation. All right, so then let's go to the boomers, the next group. What did the boomers want? The boomers were big on change. They wanted to be heard. They wanted to change the world. Okay, so what motivates a boomer? They just want to be part of the change process or part of the change program and be influencers at work. Okay, so now let's go to the next one, Gen X. Gen X, we said, are your steadies. They just want everything to be consistent. In my lifetime as a Gen Xer, I've seen so much change. How many times have organizations done layoffs, rifts, or we even went through the recession, right? That's ours real. That's not steady. That is like the most demoralizing thing to us right now because it's not steady. And then so let's go to the next one. Let's go to the millennials. And the millennials we said they were our C's, compliance. What do they want? Well, they want order, they want data, they want all this information that's now available at their fingertips. That's what motivates them. So we got to go back and you got to tie all these things together. And then we figure out, so you take what motivates them, but then once we understand what motivates them, we still go back to the basic understanding of people just want to be respected. And if you ask them the question, what is it? Somebody says, you said it earlier once, work-life balance. Okay, let's have a conversation with that employee. What's that look like? How did we get there? And then we start having an honest conversation. I don't think it's like
getting to an understanding. I mean, it's wanting to be understood. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's how you build trust. A common language with a mutual understanding is how you build trust.
Common language with a mutual understanding. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I like it. Common language with a mutual understanding.
That is the foundation to start building trust. So what did we learn?
We learned that patterns are starting to repeat themselves, that we can learn something from every generation, and it is easily tied to DISC, which makes it even more, I wouldn't say easy, but necessarily being able to understand each generation and the colors through DISC. So both personality types and generation types.
Yeah, it's just using something. We've just got a framework to understand it. And not everything fits in a framework. Right. That's just the model for understanding. You nailed it.
And getting to that someone's motivator, because at the end, right, all of that ties in: motivator, understanding, and respect. What was the quote, Ty, again? Mutual.
Mutual. No.
Common language.
Common language. Mutual
understanding.
Yeah,
is a foundation for trust.
Yep.
Or you could say a mutual understanding of a common language. When people are using the same terms and they're talking the same thing, let's talk about jargon, right? So here's where trust can be made with jargon through automotive, CR. Who knows what a CR is? PSI. We got all these little acronyms, these little terms. Frame damage, bonded title. You got all these things. If you're in the industry and you know that, you're included. If you're in the industry and you don't know it, now you're excluded. But that's a common language. And once everybody starts understanding that, you actually build up a little bit of trust. So that's a double-edged sword in that example. You got to make sure the other person knows what you're talking about. So let's say you're having a management meeting, get everybody around the table. Everybody's got a notebook. Take 5 minutes of just silence. Okay, each individual write down what your definition of trust is. And then carefully get people to be vulnerable enough to share that and write those definitions down on a board. So let's say you've got 10 managers, you should have 10 definitions up there. Every one of them is going to be completely different in words and in thoughts. But in theory, there's going to be a lot in common. Now let's take those 10 and as a team, let's come up with what are the commonalities? What do we see here? Start pulling those words out or those themes out and writing them down. Now go rewrite a sentence about what trust means based on that stuff. Now you've just built your team dynamic of what trust is. You've got a common language, a common understanding that builds a foundation for trust.
There's our mic drop.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Meet Me at the Gate. I hope the conversation has helped to fuel your drive and equip you with insights to steer your team towards success. Remember, the road to success is always under construction. And until next time, keep your engines revving and your gas tanks full.